Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Packers Unscripted from Packers.com. I am Mike Spofford, joined, as always, by my trusted colleague, Wes Hodkiewicz. We're coming to you here from our studios at Lambeau Field. And Wes, the training camp train keeps rolling along here.
I feel like I've been hit by it
a couple of times, especially these last couple of days with the hot and humid weather out there at Reinitschke Field. But before we get to our observations of what we have seen through that steamy weather on the practice field, Packers are going to be wearing a white helmet.
They are.
Against the Houston Texans on October 20th. That was announced this morning. The winter warning, late October, all white. The whiteout uniforms now include a white helmet. Personally, I think they look pretty sharp. I would not want the Packers to wear them all the time. But for one game a season, I think it's pretty cool.
Well, it's the old chocolate cake analogy. I mean, you enjoy having chocolate cake for dessert every once in a while. You don't want to eat it for every single meal, right? That's how that usually goes. But I love them. I was excited about it when this all started to kind of rumble up. And I'll tell you what, too, I think it's going to be such a cool thing because the big promotion that's going to be tied to this with the Texans game is everybody in the crowd wearing white as well. 80,000 fans, if that can come to fruition and have everybody get that buy-in with it going into the game, I think it could be a really neat atmosphere. I've always felt, even with the yellow, the gold helmets, the honey gold, that those are such a cool look under the lights with the full white uniform. But I think, these type of matchups, man, and you find ways. It's kind of like the college football sort of fervor entering into the National Football League a little bit, just to find ways to kind of amp up, what otherwise could be somewhat just of a typical October football game. I think it'll raise the stakes a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see, so many fans that come to Lambeau Field and they wear, the home jersey of their favorite player. Like, will they go get the road jersey so that they wear the white, to fit in with the whiteout thing? I think it's going to be pretty cool too. So something to look forward to.
Hey, quick shout out to our people too. Our social team, our digital team did an amazing job. Lauren Anderson Stone, some of the photography that Evan Siegel got, just an awesome package, an awesome rollout. Kudos to them on how they went about unveiling this on Thursday morning.
There you go.
Yep. I know what day of the week it is.
I'm not sure I do. 100% kudos to that crew. Some pretty cool stuff. On the field, Wes, there have been 2 more practices since our last show. And I think in a very general sense, and we'll get to maybe talking about some more specific players as the show goes along, but in a very general sense, we're starting to see Jordan Love and this number 1 offense find its rhythm a little bit. Jordan Love getting his, training camp legs under him, so to speak, after observing for the first 4 practices. Now he's been involved in running the number 1 offense for 4 practices. We're starting to see the offense make some of the plays that we're accustomed to see them making.
And everybody getting involved in that playmaking as well. That was, as I walked away from the practice field on Wednesday, I was thinking a lot about how you think about the 47-yard pass to Christian Watson, something that him and Love had talked about because they saw the safeties creeping up. They're going to try to take advantage of it, go for a big explosive play. It seems like more often than not in these practices, Love has been hitting Watson on some type of game breaker, some type of explosive play. You look over at Jaden Reed. He doesn't run the right route in one of the 2-minute periods, but him and Love are able to connect on the field. Love scrambles to buy time. You can even see him pointing out there what he wants Reed to do. Lofts a 22-yard pass, and then they keep what ends up being a touchdown-producing drive going, which was finished off with Dontavian Wicks in the back of the end zone. Love then throws just an absolute laser on the 2-point conversion to convert because there wasn't a kicking day, so they were down 7. They had to go for 2. There were so many, and then, Romeo Doubs is as steady as they come. So yeah. For Love to reconnect and get that chemistry and get back in sync with his top 4 wideouts again, I think has been so encouraging. And yeah, it's not flawless. As Love talked about, Xavier McKinney baited him into an interception during one of the team periods. But by and large, this offense, just seeing how it operates now with Love back under center, it's been so smooth.
Yeah, and Offensively, looking at the guys up front, a couple of comments that are worth making here. One is that in that competition at right guard between Jordan Morgan and Sean Ryan, we're seeing Jordan Morgan, the rookie first-round pick from Arizona, is the first guy up now. Yep. And he's been taking more of the first-team reps than Sean Ryan has. Now, things can always change once the preseason games get going and all that. But it is a little bit of a shift in that in how those reps are being divided, and so that's worth keeping an eye on with regard to Morgan. And a guy that we haven't talked about but certainly deserves to be talked about is Rasheed Walker at left tackle, because the assumption was when Jordan Morgan was drafted in the first round with that 25th overall pick that the Packers used in April that, okay, here's the competition for Rasheed Walker at left tackle, the former 7th-round pick who settled into that job last year, did a fine job. He's going to have to hold off a first-rounder. Well, he basically held him off through OTAs and minicamp because, as we heard from Adam Stenovich, when the coaches sat down leading up to training camp to look at things and decide, okay, we have a first-round draft pick on the offensive line. We want him to be able to compete for a starting job. Where is his best opportunity to compete and get himself into the lineup as a rookie first-round pick? They decided it was at right guard, not at left tackle, and that tells you all you need to know about how the Packers and this coaching staff and this offense feel about Walker as he now enters year 3, really year 2 in terms of his playing, but year 3 in the NFL.
It's the beautiful thing about the National Football League. I just got done going through the top 4 receivers on the Packers depth chart, the plays that they're making. And then a lot of times with offensive linemen, particularly the tackles, the less you hear about them through the first week of training camp, the less you hear about them in games, the better it is. That's right. How Zach Tom got noticed, because it was almost like a week or two into it a couple of years ago. It was like, wow, so this guy just doesn't really do anything wrong. He just kind of plays the position and holds his guy at bay. In a lot of ways, Walker has been able to do that as well. And, he's facing extremely difficult competition in the form of Preston Smith and Rashawn Gary and really high-level edge rushers in this National Football League in practice on a daily basis. And yet you can see how that has sort of fortified his game. I thought Larry McCarron in our 3 Things video, I watched that same exact play Larry did. He broke it down more from the fundamentals, the footwork, the hands, the body balance. But just watching him stand up to Preston Smith, there is no wide-eyed glare there. He understands what his assignment is. He executes it. And over again, Mike, I think back to the 2023 draft and the fact that, or I should say the 2022 draft.
Yeah.
And the fact that, he goes in the 7th round. And I remember looking up Sheed's name afterwards and seeing these mock drafts from a year earlier that had him as a potential first rounder.
Right.
I can't tell you everything that went into that 365-day switch, but because it's nothing wrong. The guy didn't do anything wrong. In a lot of ways, it's kind of like the Kalen King deal. But that being said, I think slowly but surely he's proving this guy was supremely underdrafted, and the Packers really seem to have found a guy that could be a really lockdown offensive lineman for them for years to come.
It's interesting, though, because it speaks to the importance and the value of player development.
Yeah.
Because during Rasheed Walker's rookie year, we were all saying, typical 7th-round pick, he's not going to play, he's got a long way to go, et cetera. And he didn't play. He played, what was it, like 4 snaps on special teams? His entire rookie season, that's all he saw the field. But he developed, he stuck with it. Then he sort of gets thrown into it when David Bakhtiari goes down again last season. And now, and then there was, for a while, there was the job sharing thing between Walker and Yosh Nijman last season. But, he sort of, put that to rest and locked down that position for the stretch run last year. And now here he is. So hats off to Walker. And if he becomes what it looks like he's going to become, could be one of the most amazing 7th-round picks. There have been some good ones in history here since the reduction of the 7-round draft when you're talking about guys like Scotty Wells at center and Donald Driver at wide receiver and Mark Tauscher at offensive tackle and guys like that, he could be talked about maybe in that same realm.
Yeah, and certainly, ways to go for him, but the fact that he's playing a premium position, as good as Mark was, as good as Scott Wells was, we're talking about left tackle.
Yeah.
That is one of the...
And that is kind of what changes the dialogue about it a little bit.
And before we pivot, just to throw out a shout out there to Jordan Morgan as well. This guy being planted in at right guard, the first time he's playing that position, you were talking about how that rotation kind of stopped in the practices we've watched this week so far, where he's been kind of just, he's a right guard right now. That's where they're keeping him. I think that's a credit to him that he's actually shown that too, that, okay, even though I came in here as a tackle, I want to play tackle, I was a college left tackle, he has stepped up to that challenge, and the Packers have allowed him to be in that role. Different rounds in which they were selected, but in a lot of ways it does remind me of John Runyon, who was an all Big Ten tackle at Michigan.
Two-time all Big Ten tackle.
And he actually had to come in and, I don't want to say learn guard, but that was like, that's where you're going to be.
Yeah.
And he ended up, you saw the contract he got this offseason. He made the most of it.
Yeah, absolutely. One other quick note on offense before we shift gears to the defense. You mentioned the top 4 wide receivers, the chemistry, the way things are developing and evolving with Jordan Love. But there's a guy further down the depth chart at wide receiver who's potentially going to make for a very difficult decision for the Packers personnel folks when it's all said and done here. Obviously, it's early in training camp. We haven't even gotten to family night or the preseason games. But Grant DuBose, I don't want to overplay it and make it sound like he's been a superstar every day. But you and I have been doing this for a long time, and when there's a guy who shows up and makes a play or two every day on the practice field, you can't help but notice it, and then you can't help but watch him a little bit more, right? Grant DuBose is starting to do that. Can he continue it? Can he make the push from after essentially a redshirt year as a rookie where he was a 7th-round pick, dealt with injury issues, spent the whole season on the practice squad, but he's making a run at a roster spot, at least from what I've seen.
I'll tell you what, Mike, if we can just flash the calendar back for a year, if you look at it like an 800 race, 800-meter race and track, it's 2 trips around the track.
Right.
The guy, due to that back injury, they were already 1 lap into that thing by the time he even got on the field.
Right.
But you saw him run that 1 lap that he ran, and he did it in a pretty good time. Grant DuBose last offseason, last training camp, those 2 preseason games he got in those handful of practices looked good. The problem was Packers ended up having guys like Malik Heath. They had 3, rookie draft picks that came in. They had Bo Melton was back. They had so much competition at that position.
Yeah.
It's all still there. And Grant DuBose comes out in this first week of training camp with the reps that he's gotten, with the reps he's received, and he showed, I was a part of that trio of rookie draft picks last year. I was pretty darn talented coming out of Charlotte. I was a big play machine. And seeing him high point that ball, in one of the number 2 team periods on Wednesday, they get a free play. Sean Clifford goes back. He throws him just a beautiful ball down the sideline. DuBose is double covered.
Yeah, 2 defenders.
Evan Williams and Zane Anderson are both in coverage there. And not like playing off. They're right there. But DuBose times his jump perfectly, high points it, comes down, and you're paying for that type of catch and the way he landed on his body, and bounces right back up, and just the way the offense responded to that.
Yeah.
And it hasn't just been that. It's been some of the slant routes, some of the things he's doing. He has a really natural physique and frame for the receiver position. You could see that from the beginning. But what he's been able to do with it in a competition that has 7 former draft picks, 8 guys with NFL experience, Grant DuBose is very much in this thing.
If he's able to make the Packers 53-man roster, and even if he's on the practice squad again, but who knows, he could end up contributing as Bo Melton did last year when he made the switch from the practice squad to the active roster. However this thing works out, he becomes a heck of a story when you look back at, you mentioned Charlotte, Packers drafted him out of Charlotte. But before that, he was at a small school, I believe it was called Miles College in Alabama.
Correct, Division II.
A Division II school that essentially cancels football during COVID. Like, it just went away.
Yeah.
And his football career might have been completely over at that point. Like, nowhere to go, nothing to do. He ends up making his way to Charlotte, gets a Division I opportunity there, becomes one of the last players picked in the 2023 NFL draft, and here he is in probably the most crowded position group on the Packers roster, on the playoff contenders roster, and he's making some noise on the practice field and trying to make a run at a roster spot. It's pretty cool to see. On the defensive side, a few guys worth talking about, and I'll mention them quickly. I'll let you elaborate if you want to. Eric Wilson, veteran linebacker, he's become very quickly a special teams leader for the Packers, but he's also not exactly getting budged out of that third off-ball linebacker spot in the 4-3 base. And when you watch practices, you watch the 11-on-11, he's around the ball all the time, and every time you see him near the football, especially on a running play, you're reminded, this guy had 100-plus tackles one year with the Minnesota Vikings as a starting linebacker, even though he's not a household name by any means. You mentioned Xavier McKinney earlier. He got an interception against Jordan Love yesterday. The day before, he dropped that interception at the goal line. So he kind of got his revenge a little bit. He was able to hang on to the one, get the pick there. And with all the other safeties, the young safeties that have been making plays, Xavier McKinney's starting to make his too, and he would almost have 2 interceptions in a row in practices if he'd hung on to the one on Tuesday. And then Kingsley Enagbari. His story in terms of his injury was something that, as we talked about in the spring, just unheard of in a sense. But he's out there running around, getting pressures, knocking down passes at the line of scrimmage like he was never injured at all. Yeah. And I think, knock on wood with Enagbari in that knee, if everything truly is okay, he's going to be a key player in the edge rushing rotation for this defense.
Yeah, I want to just mention quickly to you, obviously I think Rob Domofsky might have been on that huddle as well. I really appreciated how informative Enagbari was on where he's at physically, because at first he was a little bit guarded about what exactly had happened with the knee. In the locker room on Wednesday, he went into a bit more detail. He did say, the ACL is partially torn, and there was a time where that happens. You have to get it repaired. Football's over. It is what it is. But, he went through the rehab. He developed the muscles around the injury, around the knee, strengthened the leg. He feels like he's in the best shape of his life right now. And I didn't get a chance to ask him this myself. I would have been interested to see what he thought in his mind when he had that rep. I believe it was against Luke Tenuta in practice on Wednesday where, he pulls off like the spin move type thing, looked quick, explosive, fast. The offensive lineman could not get a hand on him, and he won the rep for a sack. He goes back, defensive players just mauling him, high fives, all that type of thing. This is a guy that 6 months ago was sitting in the Dallas locker room with the towel over his head thinking that the 2024 season's probably not in the cards for him, at least not most of it. And here he is filling out. We're talking about all these positions, Mike, and it just seems like you look down the list of the Green Bay Packers, man, yes, receiver is supremely stacked, but like outside linebacker, now defensive end, is a very talent-rich position. And even though you have Lucas Van Ness there, Enagbari is still right at the top of that rotation as well. It's an exciting thing for this Packers defense, and I'm excited to see what he does with this opportunity. It's a day-to-day thing. He said he's just got to keep monitoring where this thing goes. But from what we've seen on the practice field, Kingsley Enagbari looks like nothing had ever happened.
Yeah, and I should mention as well with regard to the defense when I bring up Eric Wilson that Isaiah McDuffie's been holding down that spot with the number 1 defense alongside Quay Walker with that off-ball linebacker group. Edgerrin Cooper, I believe I saw him drop out of practice yesterday. We haven't really, at the time we're taping this, we haven't really gotten an update as to what's up with that. But yeah, hats off.
Tune in Tuesday, we'll have an update.
Yeah, hats off to McDuffie and Wilson because those guys have held on to their spots with the number 1 defense. thus far in training camp. They deserve a lot of credit for that. So quickly, was some sponsor business. Sirius XM NFL Radio delivers hard-hitting analysis and up-to-the-minute NFL news that true football fanatics need 24/7, 365. And at Cousin Subs, we have something for everyone, like our Wisconsin cheese curds, mac and cheese, golden fries, and creamy shakes, all paired with your favorite sub or sub in a bowl. Cousin Subs, 50-plus years of better. Last thing before we go, next up after today's practice, next up will be family night, under the lights, Lambeau Field, Saturday night. Just wanted to get your thoughts on kind of what are you going to be watching for from the press box? Our first foray into the press box in 2024. What are you going to be watching for?
Well, other than my son, we'll be attending his first family night. Very excited about that.
Does he like fireworks?
He does.
Okay.
He also likes
because it's quite the show. I mean, we never get to see it because we're always working, but it is quite the show to end the night.
He likes fireworks. He also likes sleep. We're gonna see which one prevails on Saturday night. So I family night's one of my favorite nights of the year. Like you said, we've never seen the fireworks. I've never seen the laser show. I'm usually trying to convince players in the locker room to talk to me for 34 seconds. But that being said, I remember it's the first event I ever covered as a member of the Packers beat. It was when Brandon Ross intercepted Aaron Rodgers.
Oh, sure.
In what I think was like an 8-minute family night because of like thunderstorm or something like that. And there's always moments like that where it's an undrafted guy that makes a play. It's somebody that shines on that stage. We're going to see the kicking competition some more, I would imagine, between Anders Carlson and Greg Joseph. It's always a neat experience because the vibe and the energy level inside Lambeau Field with people welcoming the team back into the Stadium Bowl for the first time in 7-8 months is always just electric. So I'm very much looking forward to that. And just seeing, it's not the old scrimmage format. I understand that. That's been done away with for about 10 years now. But, the 2-minute drills, we've seen some of them. We've watched some of them in downpouring rain before.
Yep.
They've done live tackling underneath Matt LaFleur in this era too with the number 3. So many different elements and play with it. But I just think watching how players interact with the fans and just how that camaraderie gets built up again after having so much time apart is always the most fun for me.
Yeah, I'm going to be keeping an eye on certainly the kicking competition. I think it's the next step between Carlson and Joseph in terms of, will there be some kind of a separation here in terms of somebody taking the lead. I think there's a lot to watch in terms of, we've been talking about the offensive line, but in terms of the backup tackle positions and how
swing tackle's huge,
how the Packers are going to sort this out between Andre Dillard and Kadeem Telfort and
Caleb Jones is involved.
Caleb Jones is in that mix. Luke Tenuta, who you mentioned before, all these guys in the mix, all sort of with different stories in terms of how they got to this point, and battling for a roster spot on the depth on the Packers offensive line. Because, quite frankly, if Jordan Morgan is potentially going to be starting at right guard, Sean Ryan, who would be a backup guard, is not a tackle, hasn't been playing tackle since he came into the NFL. Jordan Morgan, I don't think, is suddenly going to bounce out to tackle as the the first guy up if something happens there. Maybe they would go that route, but it doesn't seem that way at this point. So how the swing tackle and the depth at that position gets sorted out, I think is important.
Keep in mind, Zach Tom is at all times could be a backup at every single position.
Right.
Which means even if it's unrelated to Zach Tom, there could be somebody that has to step in at that right tackle post. That's why these reps that Telford has been taking have been so critical.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing I'm just going to see, I don't know what the layout of the practice schedule is, but I'm wondering if we're going to see some live reps of the kickoff, the new kickoff thing, because they're working on it here and there in practice, but we're watching from field level, and quite frankly, it's hard to really see what's going on, and really understanding schematically, kind of how this is being set up. So that the chance to watch it, and it'll be more important in the preseason games, and we'll talk more about it then, but the chance to see it from up above for the first time and just and see the timing of it and just kind of the function and how it works. I'm kind of looking forward to that because I'm hoping that we get a chance to see it.
I like an inbox. You had to edit it, but somebody had asked me like, "Hey, how much have they been practicing this? So far this play?" And I'm like, "They've been practicing it, but to me, it kind of feels like an avant-garde performance where I'm just sitting there like, oh yeah, okay. Have no idea what I'm watching.
Yeah, no, we don't. We really just don't. It's a whole new world, a brave new world.
There's
for
blocking
NFL
pads,
special teams. Yeah.
There's players, there's cones, and they're figuring it out. People, you're just gonna have to trust me on that one. But you're right. I mean, in Cleveland, that's going to be a big moment too to see what this thing starts to look like.
Yeah. All right. Well, we've got to get out to the practice field shortly. So with that, we'll call it a wrap on this edition of Packers Unscripted. Be sure to follow all of our coverage of training camp and everything going on with the team. We've got it all for you on Packers.com. For Wes, I am Mike. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. We will see you next time.